Hello, everyone. Welcome to GreenSky's podcast, episode 15. I'm your host, Moien Giashi. I'm a principal with GreenSky Ventures, and today my guest is Geoff Simonett. Geoff, thank you so much for being with us today. Why don't we just kick it off with an introduction of yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Moen. This is great. Happy to be here. An introduction to myself. I'm Geoff Simonett, as you mentioned. Work with early stage tech companies, investing and helping them out in general. This goes back to I started I joined a company at a university that only had 8 people and helped build that, which led to angel investing eventually after an exit and a bunch of other things in between. But now I'm mostly working with early stage tech companies. I sit on a couple of boards. Method is one of them. I'm on an investment committee for the Atmospheric Fund in Toronto.
Awesome, great. I'm curious to learn more about your entrepreneurial journey. Do you want to give us a bit more details on what you worked on, what you built before?
Sure. And it wasn't a plan. It wasn't that I set out to be an entrepreneur. And I think when I finished university in '92, I don't think being an entrepreneur was something that a lot of people thought about. The world's changed quite a lot since then. There were, of course, entrepreneurs, but it wasn't something we talked about a lot in university or in general. I did a commerce degree and I was planning on going to law school, and I got into law school, but I got offered a job at the end of university, which I took, and it didn't last that long. So I found myself getting ready to go traveling, and I still hadn't applied for any jobs yet. Hadn't even written my resume because I was not going to do the recruiting thing from school. But I had a 5.25-inch floppy. This is probably way before your time, but they were the big ones that were actually floppy at the time, with a half-written resume. And while passing through Toronto, a friend of mine worked at a IT company. There's only 7 people, and I asked her if I could borrow a computer and finish my resume. So I went up to her office. The owner, one of the partners in the company, was a Queen's Commerce grad, 10 years older than me. He asked me out for lunch. We got to talking. He offered me a job to help him build his company. And I thought, well, I wasn't doing anything, so let's give it a shot. Very small and entrepreneurial company. So learned a lot of things, very hands-on. They were doing custom development. We also had a hardware and network implementation part of the company, which all of those things would have looked very different then than they are now. This is pre-internet, pre-mobile phone, so '92. But along the way, it allowed me to start a company within there, take one of the solutions that we had done many times before, which was really customer relationship management, although it was before they called it CRM. We just kept writing custom software for a lot of companies to do that. So I took that and convinced the 2 partners to start a new company and make a product out of it, which we did. Also started a training center downtown, and we were training people on Lotus Notes. So again, this is a long time ago. Briefly had a .com started during the .com days, but it was a very entrepreneurial company that allowed me to have a job and get paid while starting companies at the same time and owning a small piece of those companies. So it wasn't a plan, but that all we sold all of the companies together to Cognicase in 2001, which got taken over by CGI in probably 2003. I remained in Cognicase for a year, and large company wasn't really for me, so I spent most of my time trying to figure out how to get out of Cognicase. But I left, and the experience of having built some companies along the way and running my own team and making my own decision just made me realize that was probably the path I wanted to take. So that's really where the roots started. After that, I started angel investing and made some money off of the deal. So I started doing some angel investing in the early 2000s. I was around when some of the early angel groups started, like the Maple Leaf Angels, a few others. Started a small marketing company, which eventually sold to an individual, and also was running an oil and gas fund. So got into some oil and gas investing. Small fund, never really, it was just sort of a trial fund to start with, and we never ended up launching another one. That's another longer story. But that all eventually led to GreenSky. And
Nice.
then
And
what
that's where, yeah, we want to talk a bit more in detail. Like, we know that you are one of the founders of GreenSky originally. So I'm just excited to hear that story. How did this started? What did you guys do? And then we have the fund after so many years.
Yeah, well, I wish it was an exciting story, but there's really not that much to it. So after exiting my first companies, there was so this I remained in Cognicase till 2002. Spent some time traveling after that, and then was kind of looking for what do I want to do next. While I started the marketing company, which was kind of a hobby, not a plan to build a big company. The oil and gas fund never really went anywhere, so I spent a number of years sort of doing those, but sitting in my basement thinking about, okay, what's the next big thing, and coming up with some plans. I found that didn't really get me anywhere until I started going out more and just meeting people and going to events. And that started the ideas flowing. But as I mentioned, I started angel investing at the time. And I wanted to get a company going that had something to do with entrepreneurs and something to do with investing. So I grabbed the URL GS Capital, I think, which is just my initials at the time. But quickly ran into, through a friend of mine, another connection, a guy, his name's Scott Sinna, who came from the private equity world. He was a partner in a private equity fund, so doing large deals. I only knew the startup world. We joined together. We were both kind of between things and said, okay, we're two nice guys. I think we're smart, so let's try and figure something out. And we decided we'd help companies raise capital and grow, but kind of middle market companies for Canada, smaller than what he'd been used to dealing with, and larger than what I used to deal with. So that was maybe late 2007, early 2008, which was maybe not a great time to start a company and help other companies invest, as I'm sure know what was going on in the economy at that time. Early on, we chatted with a friend of mine from long before that, Mike List. Mike and I were both in residence and university, the same residence, so we'd met each other back then. But we got to know each other playing ultimate frisbee in the early to mid 90s. Sometimes on different teams, sometimes on the same team, but we played a lot of ultimate together. He was still in the early stages of his law firm, Ornston List Frowley at the time. They had some office space, so Scott and I moved in. Mike was very interested in what we were doing. We kind of all partnered together, along with another guy, and we decided, okay, we'll assist companies. Sort of, I don't think we called ourselves an investment bank, but it would have been something like that, a boutique investment bank, with mid-stage companies and mining deals. And the reality is, we had trouble finding a lot of those deals at the time, and getting involved. We did a little bit, but eventually, my partner Scott decided he wanted to go back and get a real job. He had a family, he needed to make some money. So our other partner I mentioned was joined us for a little while, moved on to other things. So that left Mike and I. And Mike at the time was focused on building the law firm, also on GreenSky, but he was building a law firm among other things at the time. So I sort of said, okay, well, what do I know better? It's early stage tech companies. A friend of mine had just notified me of some companies that were looking to get some help in raising capital. One of the first ones was, I think my very first client, we're now at about 2010, was Wave Accounting. So Uh, I helped Wave Accounting build their financial model and structure a deal and find investors. And just coincidentally, our offices at the time were on University Avenue, where Ormston List used to be and where GreenSky was. Right across the road was Omer's. They've also not there anymore. Omer's had just started a venture capital fund, wasn't well known at the time. I was crossing the road going for lunch, and I ran into Peter Koresha, who was a partner there at the time. He used to have a role at Lotus, and because my original company was a big Lotus Notes company, I'd gotten to know Peter Koresha from the Lotus days. Just ran into him on the street, asked, hey, what are you doing now? What are you doing now? Well, I'm working with a company that's looking to raise some capital. Well, that's interesting. I'm running a fund that's looking to invest in early stage SaaS software companies. Oh, that's neat. That's what we are. So that led to a conversation. It led to Omer's very first investment, which was Wave Accounting, and kind of got GreenSky going with early stage tech deals. So at the time, we were not a fund. We were an exempt market dealer. We were assisting companies in raising capital. We were also investing in them. So we would usually write a check, but just personal or out of GreenSky funds itself, no investors in GreenSky. And just found a number of companies that we thought were very interesting, that we could help with the process of raising capital and grow. And often we'd stay on as advisors. I think some of them viewed us as fractional CFOs at the time, although we didn't call ourselves that. And that's kind of how it started.
Cool. And how, I mean, I'm just curious, you mentioned Wave Accounting. How was that as an exit for Omer's? Do we know that?
Yeah, it turned out to be a very good exit. Now, so we worked with Wave Accounting for maybe a couple of years. So the Omer's investment, we helped them with the early angel investors. We brought in a bunch of other investors, including the CEO of Method, actually, was a big investor in one of the early Wave Accounting rounds. That led to them getting investment in Charles River, which we helped, a VC out of Boston. And by that time, they kind of graduated how GreenSky at the time, myself and Mike, could help them. So they kind of moved on in their journey. So there was a number of years there that we were not working with Wave Accounting, and it wasn't until I'm not sure what year they exited, but I want to say 2020. So like 10 years later, maybe it was even 2021, somewhere around there. So it was a long path from what was originally a 3-year plan with $1.5 million. I think you've heard this story before. We need a small amount of money. We're going to exit in 3 years. Well, of course, that's really never how it turns out. It did end up being a great exit for all involved. By that time, I had left GreenSky, and our equity in Wave was held in GreenSky. So I wasn't a part of that exit, unfortunately, but I think it was a pretty big win for everybody who we brought in.
Nice, nice. And so, yeah, GreenSky started a fund in 2015. That was Fund 1. We are now Fund 6. We've been around for 10 years as a VC fund. And during this past 10-year, I mean, at least the past 5 years that I've been part of the fund, we've been working with you a lot. You've been sending us deals. We've been looking at deals together. I guess in your view, GreenSky as a fund, how has it evolved? What is the focus? How do we operate that is different or similar to other funds in Canada, at least?
Well, that's somewhat of a difficult question for me as because I wasn't really part of GreenSky for a lot of.
What is your view on GreenSky is the question.
Well, so originally we'd always talked about becoming a fund. I think that was I don't know if I want to call it the goal, the objective, a dream when we first started off. Early on, we had watched a number of funds in Canada trying to raise capital and it being a long process. So I think Mike and I decided, okay, what we're doing right now is working. We're just working with early stage companies. We see some great ones. We see lots of them. We have the opportunity to invest our own money. Do we want to, really focus on raising a fund, which could take a long time? So we didn't end up doing that until until I left GreenSky, and that kind of changed the direction, and I think in some ways opened up the opportunity to launch a fund. So Fund One was after I left GreenSky. Now there were, the track record was built before, the plan was built before. We probably had some decks in place before. I was still around, of course, chatting with Mike and new partners at that time. But the fund and the evolution is very little to do with me. That's the current GreenSky team, and I think it was the right step in the evolution for GreenSky. And well, again, I'm not privy to everything that's going on there now. It seems like it's been very successful. I think it is really where Mike's interest was at the time, and now all of the partners and everybody else on the team. And I think you guys have found a great balance with having people like yourself and others who really understand technology, not on a surface, but in a deeper level. Having some people also that have built and run and understand the difficulties of getting a business off the ground. They've been there. You also have legal minds on the team as well. And of course, when you're negotiating deals and making investments and helping companies navigate their path, having a real great understanding of contracts and deals and negotiating and everything else is a huge advantage as well. So I commend you guys. It's great. I wish I'd stayed around. Who knew what was about to happen? I do think partly my leaving helped to kick that into gear, strangely. But and in that time, we've always remained pretty close. I run into lots of companies. A number of your investments have been companies that have come through me at one time or another. And you've also said no to a lot of the companies that brought you, which, that's the way it's supposed to work. So we've invested in some together. We're still in some together. So hopefully there's some big exits in both of our futures.
Absolutely. That's what we want. Big exits.
Yeah.
Cool. And so Geoff, you've been obviously both sides of the table, advising the startups, investing, running a startup company. Mm, And this is a very broad question, but like obviously a lot of the founders that watch our show wanna basically get some advice, get some feedback from somebody who's done it before to avoid red flags. That's the kind of question that I get all the time. Like, what are the red flags that you see from startups when it comes to fundraising, when it comes to this, when it comes to that? This is a very broad question, but I'm just curious what comes to your mind first. Or like, what are a couple of big red flags that you see when you work with these founders?
Yeah, I get that question a lot, especially when I'm working with the accelerators. We see a ton of companies. There's lots of events. It's a frequent question. And I think the reality is people like to have the conversation, but then entrepreneurs are going to make their own decisions anyway. So I can lay out the red flags, but I don't know if anyone listens until they go, "Oh yeah, I think I heard that before. We just made the mistake that someone told me a long time ago." I would say, like at a very high level, one of the things that I see a lot is, are they ready for fundraising, or in fact, should they be fundraising at all? And I think just the way that the whole tech world has evolved. Because when I started off, there wasn't a lot of options for venture capital. I don't even know if I knew venture capital existed. Of course it did, but it wasn't something that was in the headlines every day. Neither was being an entrepreneur. So if you were thinking about starting a company, you might put some of your own money into it, but it had to be a company that was going to generate cash pretty soon because there were very few options. The banks still weren't getting involved that early. That changed, of course, as we got into the late 90s and we got to the dot-com bubble and everybody jumped in. But again, when that blew up, it disappeared in Canada again. No sources of funding. So today I find everybody kind of thinks I'm starting a tech company. One of the first things I have to do is go and raise capital. And I think that's a mistake, potentially. Not to say that a lot of companies, and you guys get involved with deep tech, which often does involve a need to raise capital. fairly early on. Not always, but you also invested in SaaS software companies, and they may not need to get investment right away. But I think a lot of entrepreneurs go down that path too early. They don't think about having a product that they can sell and go out and sell right away before raising capital. They don't necessarily have all of the tools in place to be ready for the capital raise. I mean, one of the things I find a lot is I'll ask the companies, okay, well, how much are you? I meet them early on, but how much are you trying to raise? Well, we're not sure yet. Well, then how is it that you know you need to raise capital? Well, we're running out of money. So they're thinking about a very short-term problem, but they haven't built a financial model, for example. They haven't thought about, if we do this raise, where does this take us? And will I have to do another raise or another raise after that? And how much of this company will I eventually own? And what's the full path? But they haven't really even done a financial model yet that lays out, okay, here's where we run out of cash. Here's how deep the hole gets. I can play with a few variables. Can I skate through that somehow without running out of cash? Maybe we should try that path first. If I absolutely need money, do I know for sure when is that money required? So I think and also, if you're building a financial model, what are the exact levers that this business needs to lean upon to build value in our company? What are we trying to achieve in the short term? What are our KPIs? And let's make sure in the financial model that we're achieving those things, because if we do go down the path of investment, eventually, once you've decided on that path, you pretty much have to move towards an exit. Your investors are not employees. They're probably not getting paid. You're probably not going to be generating dividends because you're a tech company, you're growing, and money is going to be consumed by growth. So, how and where do we get to an exit? And what does that look like? And how many raises are there between now and then? Those are difficult questions, but anyone can take the time to lay that out, knowing they'll be wrong, but at least have some framework that you can start with, that you can talk with an investor about, that shows that there is a path if we all believe in the assumptions, and let's try and execute. I just don't think they do enough of the groundwork ahead of time, which may in fact lead them to as I said, I sat in my basement for a while and I planned out companies, and some I thought were fantastic ideas, and then I build a financial model and find out, I don't know if this is going to work. So let's scrap that idea and move on to the next one. Or it might have just been, okay, my original thought was a good one. It's not going to work. What do we need to change to make it work? So I think being more prepared for the raise in the first place and really thinking it through is probably the first and biggest red flag that I run into.
So just to sum up, and this is something that I definitely also tell entrepreneurs, that asking themselves, is this now the time to raise? And then is the answer to that should include, how much money do I need? How much money do I need? The answer to that should answer, what milestones do I need to achieve? The answer to that is like, after I achieve that milestone, what is the next like you essentially have to have like a full-on financial plan, make sure that it's achievable, make sure that you know the variables. And again, goes back to that very cliche advice, know your numbers, which also
Yes.
happens a lot on the pitches that we get from entrepreneurs. We ask questions about the numbers and they're like, oh, I don't know off the top of my head. And I'm like, okay, that's a problem, because you need to live and kind of breathe the numbers. So that's definitely something that we see as well, is that companies come to us, they're not ready, they don't know why they need 2 million. Sometimes they come to us and they're like, we need 745,000, which is fun. But sometimes they're like, oh, I think like 2 to 3 million is enough. But you're very right. They essentially don't know why they need to raise. They're just looking very short term.
Yeah, and they
Um,
don't think through necessarily, okay, from the investor's point of view, what happens when I bring them in and what do they have to achieve? Because that shapes what I have to achieve. So, and they're trying, I get it, they're trying to solve a short-term problem. I don't have the money to do the next thing, which may be very true, but the next thing leads to the next thing after that. So you have to put in some long-term thinking about what this whole capital plan and company plan looks like. And that sounds complicated, and most of them don't do it because they don't know how, and it's hard to do hard things. But there's lots of resources out there, and it's like anything. Take one step, find a template for a model, do your best, ask a few questions, and it will come together.
Awesome. I want to ask one more question. So you guys have started GreenSky '08 or '09, not the best time. It was definitely difficult to, let's say, raise money if you were a startup at that time. There, there are some similarities now as well, like 2025, you have tariffs, the economy is a bit slower. VCs are still on the fence. They're not really deploying as fast. Founders think about valuation a lot. Founders think about dilution a lot when they talk to VCs. What is your angle? What is your advice to founders? Like how do they think about how should they think about, let's say, valuation, dilution, given the market?
Yeah, good question. I'm not sure if I think about it much in the context of where the current market is at, other than, I mean, valuations on the whole go up and go down, so you have to be aware of that. Again, I mostly work with pretty early stage companies, often before they would have any venture capital fund. I mean, you guys write early checks. I'm probably a step before you, although we cross over, and hopefully my companies grow up and uh, have Series A, B, and C maybe, or don't need it hopefully and move to an exit. But I mean, I think about a few things. First of all, to your point, when you're thinking about valuation, a lot of the companies that I work with don't have enough numbers and KPIs to say, okay, it's just a multiple of this or a multiple of that. But they need to know those things. And really, and I don't, I know there's methods. I think they have names like the Burkus method, or, you know, cash flow net present value method, and a bunch of others. At the early stage, I mean, it's good to know what those are and where you have value, but I don't think those really come to a useful number. What you have to do is a couple things to think about. One, you have to understand where deals are happening in your space right now with relatively similar companies. Maybe they're a little bit larger, maybe not, but you got to go out and do your research and just say, okay, well, there's been a bunch of financings recently in similar companies and they look like this. So that's kind of what's happening in the market right now. I can go out and say to investors, look at these deals. It's some tangible evidence. I mean, it's a different situation, but it is kind of what's going on in the market. That's the first thing to really understand. But eventually, it all comes down to a negotiation. Your valuation is what someone else is willing to pay and what you're willing to give up. And so you really have to understand what leverage do you have in that. Do you have a really strong technology and a really strong team that other companies don't have? Well, then maybe you're worth more. Do you have, line of sight on large contracts, or, do you have really strong patents or something else? I mean, all of these things give you a bit of leverage in the conversation. Back to the financial model, you have to think this through and say, okay, well, if we actually execute as per our plan, will we be able to achieve a meaningful exit for our investors? And I think at the stage I mostly mean investors, that exit has to look like it's way larger than what they would say on paper we're looking for in returns, because who knows what's going to happen between now and then. But if you built a model and it didn't show a meaningful exit for the investors, well, the conversation is going to end pretty quickly. And then finally, and I think the last thing in the list for me is you have to be aware of how much you're going to give away of your company. I think people spend too much time worrying about owning the whole pie rather than having a smaller piece in a bigger pie. And at the end, when you're exiting and you look back and say, okay, was I worth 4 million or 3.5 million or 4.5 million at the time? Probably not that big a deal, because somewhat these companies are a bit binary. Either they're going to work or they're not going to work. And when you get to an exit, sure, you'd want to have more equity, but either everyone's going to win or not. So they have to be aware of that. And I do see some companies make the mistake of they'll raise, a whole lot of $10,000 checks just to, because I'm looking again one step forward and I keep raising capital and keep raising capital. And by the time I get to an institutional investor, I've already given away 60% of the company. And then it doesn't look that attractive for the institutional investor because the main driving force doesn't have enough ownership. So they do have to be aware of that. And of course, you want to own as much as you can. But if you're bringing in a partner who's going to help fund your company and is going to add value to it, then that's worth something. And, be willing to, be willing to give up a little bit on that in order to get to the ultimate goal as, a successful company with a big exit.
I think, yeah, what definitely stands out to me is that a lot of entrepreneurs think of owning a bigger piece of the pie rather than thinking of how big that pie can get and like bringing on the right partners, because that's the most important thing. And
Yeah,
that allows the company to succeed. And if, as you said, if the company succeeds, everybody wins. If the company doesn't succeed, it doesn't matter how much you own.
that's right. Yeah. And, the same is true in reverse. The VCs, of course, want to own as much as they can in the negotiation. But, that's changed a little bit over time where, especially in the US, but more in Canada now, where venture capital funds are a lot more entrepreneur friendly than they used to be in Canada. Yeah, I mean, it has to be a relationship that works. It's a negotiation. But ultimately, it's either going to be successful and everybody will win, maybe not quite as much as they wanted to originally, but they're going to win, or they're not. And you're right, it doesn't really matter how much you own if it doesn't work.
Awesome. Well, Geoff, thank you so much for joining us on Green Skies podcast episode 15. This was a great session. I'm looking forward to seeing the final results, and I'm getting a lot of feedback from the entrepreneurs after they hear your advice. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks. It's been great. Good luck.
Awesome. Thank you.